History presentation, yes. I would like to call Minister Crystal Donisha Mansker.
Well, thank you, Pastor and family. Well, as you guys all know, February is Black History Month, where the nation takes time and takes pause to honor some of the unsung heroes of the, well, we can say now, Black people here in America.
Amen.
We're not African Americans. Nobody's been to Africa recently. No one's came back from Africa because we're such a big old huge melting pot of different cultures, religions, skin tone. I mean, we as Black people, we run the shade of skin tones that from very, 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 very fair to the people that are darker than blue.
Amen.
So it is a privilege and an honor to be an African, well, a Black woman here in America. It is a privilege to be a Black woman with an education. And it is a privilege to go through my history, your history, and bring some of these unsung heroes to life. And my unsung hero that I would like to bring to life would be Alexander Dumas. Alexander Dumas was able to have new acclaimed fame due to the movie Django. And there was one character, his name was D'Artagnan. Now, D'Artagnan was one of the three musketeers. You know, all for one and one for all. And D'Artagnan in the movie wasn't, he was a slave. And he wasn't in a very good state of mind. And one of the characters that came from abroad that didn't care for much for slavery kind of told the slave owner that the person that you love so much that written this book that you just named your slave after was Black.
Amen.
Amen.
And Monsieur Candy probably had a slight coronary when he said that. But with that, I wanted to know, okay, well, who is Alexander Dumas? Like, who is he? What did he do that was so famous? Okay, the Three Musketeers, but what else? Well, he did quite a lot. First of all, he came from mixed race just like you and I.
Amen.
His father was the first mulatto or colored general in the French army. His mother was an African slave from Haiti. They said she was probably Creole. So his father was a French general. And he had money and status until the revolution when Napoleon took over and his father fell out of favor. His father did die of cancer when he was about the age of 3. But Alexander was very, very smart. And whatever book he could find, he would read it. He went on to take fencing classes, and he was an expert swordsman. And that's what helped bolster the sword scenes in his book, The Three Musketeers. Not only did he write The Three Musketeers, he also wrote one of my personal favorites, The Count of Monte Cristo. Well, you kind of look at it this way. When the lead character's name is Mercedes, you kind of think he was probably Black. So, he also wrote The Man in the Iron Mask, which was made into a huge box office seller with Leonardo DiCaprio. And he also helped to rewrite and reconstruct The Nutcracker, Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker. So this man was a brilliant genius. He traveled all around Europe. He started newspapers. He even got in trouble with the Tsar of Russia because he didn't like the way the people were being treated. He was like a freedom fighter. Wherever he saw injustice, he said something about it with the power of the pen. He also was married and had 4 natural children. One of them went on to be a African-American acclaimed actress here in the States in Louisiana. Another one, Alexander Dumont Fili, as they call him, which means son, he went on to be an acclaimed and accomplished writer himself. Alexander was very much a free spirit, and he felt that if you can't love the one you want, love the one you with. So he had a few extramarital affairs, which he in turn had even more children, but they do recognize the 4 by his wife. He was, like most of us, black people, a little flashy, a little outgoing. He was able to buy a really beautiful mansion and call it the Castle de Monte Cristo.
All right.
And but due to his poor spending habits and big heart, he lost it within about 2 years of owning it. He lived above his means, which most aristocrats back then did, so that's not surprising. But he had a really big heart, and everyone that met him loved him. He was very personable. He had a great sense of humor, great sense of style. And as you see in the small handout that I gave everyone, that Penny removed from up here, there is a picture of Alexander Dumont in his later years. You can give it to Dad so we can see. There's a picture of Alexander Dumont in his later years. When he was younger, he was very, very handsome. And that is a picture of his father that is on the horse, the General Dumont. Very dashing. And those are some of the famous billboards of the movies that his books that inspired movies. The book, Three Musketeers, was translated over to 100 languages. And the man is still making money because they are releasing unpublished works, and the last one was released in 2005. So I must say my hat is off to Mr. Alexander Dumont. I would have never thought that one of my favorite swashbuckling tales was actually written by a black man. And I am so grateful that that was brought to light in the movie Django, because you never know who just around the corner might be the inventor of something that you like.
Amen.
Great.
And at this time, we're going to ask Pastor Mansker to come forward and give his presentation.
Amen.
Thank you, Crystal, for that eye-opening presentation of Alexander Dumas. Certainly, was some things I didn't know about him, and surprisingly enough, you know what? I've never seen this picture, and now that I can understand the Count of Monte Cristo, the Three Musketeers, it was all about. Since he was a crusader, he was all about justice. Each one of those movies about them doing the right thing and freeing the people and administering justice. So that had to be deep within his heart. And so I have another presentation too, that one that's kind of close to me, believe it or not, because I heard my father talk about his uncle, which is my great uncle, a lot. And this is during World War II, where there was much segregation during that particular time, and the military didn't become desegregated until after World War II. Many of the wars and all the wars that America has fought, there has been black men and women has been a part of it, although it is very little mention of them, from the Revolutionary War to the War of 1812, to the Spanish-American War, to all of them, in which they have acquitted themselves gallantly, probably more so than anyone, but still, after it was all over, they would, the attitude would go back as if they were unable to perform. So this presentation I'm giving you now is about the 761st all-black tank battalion of World War II. Before and during the World War II, American military leaders had reservations about using African American soldiers in combat. General Leslie J. McNair, the commander of the Army Ground Forces, successfully argued that colored units should be employed in combat. At McNair's suggestion, and also along with the president's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, who was key in this, the U.S. Army began the experiment with segregated combat units in 41. The program was supported by and given national exposure by Life magazine. The 761st was constituted on the 15th of March in 1942 and activated April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1942, at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. The battalion began training in M5 Stuart light tanks, and they had learned how to maneuver, mount, dismount, maintain the vehicle's 37mm main gun and the 30 caliber machine gun. Finally, training at Fort Hood, Texas, where they were upgraded to the M4 Sherman medium tank, which had the 75mm main gun, 30 caliber machine guns, and 50 caliber machine guns as well. They became very good at what they did. They spent about 2 years in training before they were actually deployed. So they had become the best tank unit in the Army. But because they were black, and I heard many horror stories about Fort Hood during that particular time, my uncle Jesse Dunn told me of the horrors that they inflicted upon the black soldiers there at Fort Hood. It was notorious for it. There were, as I said, there was many acts of racism, including a murder against all of the black battalions by soldiers of the nearby Camp Polk and Camp Livingston, who visited Alexandria, Louisiana, where they were stationed. On a weekend leave in March 43, several members of the unit were severely beaten, and one was killed and found dead on the train tracks in Alexandria. Several members of the 761st vowed to retaliate. They commandeered 6 tanks and a half-track and were persuaded by Lieutenant Colonel Bates, who promised to straighten out the situation so they didn't go in and blow the place up. So, also during this time, Jackie Robinson was also a part of this unit. However, Jackie Robinson, being an officer, refused to get in the back of the bus, and so the military police eventually came and arrested him, and then they wanted to charge him with insubordination. Of course, this same Colonel Bates refused to consider the court-martial, but they transferred Jackie out of that group to the 758th, where the new commander signed the insubordination court-martial order, but later on, Jackie Robinson was acquitted of all charges, but because of that, he never saw combat. Okay, now the 1st Battalion saw combat on the 7th of November, 1944, fighting through the towns of Medinavik and Vic-sur-Cécile. Now, this is all in France, so pardon my butchering of the names. Often they were often the leading edge of the advance. They was put out front. Boy, don't we know that? Don't we know that? Especially those that's been in the military. They said that, well, we don't trust you fighting, but when you over there to fight, they put you right out in the front. The unit endured, now get this, 183 days, which is a little over 6 months of continual combat. No ground military unit has ever spent 6 months of continual combat. In November 44, the unit had suffered 156 casualties, 24 men killed, 88 wounded. The unit also lost 14 tanks and 20 damaged in combat. But here's the thing that you may not know, that we should have known, but they have kept hidden for years. And love history and I love the things about World War II. If you remember the 101st Airborne being trapped in this town called Bastogne, where the colonel, they asked him to surrender, and the colonel replied to the Germans with nuts. And they went on to fight on. And then later on, Patton, because this particular group was signed to Patton's Third Army in the 4th Division, and when they arrived, Patton knew they were the best. Although Patton secretly, within his mind, did not trust them either. But he knew they were the best unit the United States had. And he wanted the best unit. So they sent him that unit. So he asked them, don't let your people down and don't let me down, in which they didn't. So the tank battalion that came to the rescue and rescued those men at Bastogne was the 761st, the all-black unit. But you never see that on TV. Never. But they were the ones that did it. And then after the Battle of the Bulge, the unit opened a way for the U.S. 4th Armored Division into Germany. During that action, they was the first unit to ever breach the Siegfried Line. They was the first unit to cross over into Germany. They was also the first unit to hook up with the Ukrainians and the Soviet Union. At that time, we were allies. And with this, the Medal of Honor has been given to 2 of these men, at least mentioned. One named Reuben Rivers received the Congressional Medal of Honor for extraordinary heroism in the action of November 15th to the 19th, 1944, where he was severely wounded in the leg. And he refused medical treatment and evacuation, and as his tank was disabled by enemy fire, he got another tank, and he continued to advance on the enemy. He was really hurt, really bad, and he continued to fight on and lead the way, and he stopped the Germans' advance. With his heroism, which he later, a few days later, he was killed in action where his tank was blown up. Again, he was in the front, and he was awarded later on that he didn't get this award until 1995. He was given the Silver Star, and finally, President Clinton recognized what this man had did and awarded him the Congressional Medal of Honor. They had another black man. He was called the baddest man in the 761st, and his name was Warren G. Searcy. And he also came to the aid of his men, and he fought through enemy positions until his tank was destroyed. He eliminated all the enemy positions, commandeering a vehicle with only a .30 caliber machine gun. He wiped them all out, including artillery positions, mortar positions, and machine gun nests. He was described as a small, sort of a small man, baby-faced and easygoing. But he was tough as nails, and it also brings me to the part that is relevant to me. I also had a great uncle. His name was Ellis, and he was in that same unit. And he was credited with shooting down a Messerschmitt 109 German fighter aircraft from his tank, and he was the tank commander. But none of this was ever mentioned. And as I researched this, it was harder and harder to find. It even had a thing, if you want to start something, you click on here and start it, to continue the research of the information, which is all there, but it's just hidden. They just don't let it out. And that's a shame. So this particular unit was eventually given presidential citations by President Jimmy Carter, and they did eventually erect a monument at Fort Hood, Texas, commemorating this particular unit. As with all the other black units in World War II, when they came home from fighting, they was not treated very fairly, very good when they came back home. However, as I said before, the President Harry Truman did desegregate the armed forces in 1947. And he also, after that unit was deactivated, he reactivated that unit just for that reason. And it was deactivated in 1955. But they still have a monument at Fort Hood commemorating the men that have fought so bravely. Fort Pat, his best armored unit was black. If you can get ready for that. So that's something, and that kind of makes me proud, because you never heard of that. And I did know there was a black unit, but I didn't know exactly what they did. But they was the spearhead of Patton's force.
Amen.
So now.